I want to introduce somebody who needs no introduction in this room because Allie Shook is the executive director of the Fountain Creek Watershed District. Allie leads the district with heart, humor, and a deep understanding of this watershed and the people who care for it. So please join me in welcoming Allie to kick this off, all right? Thanks.
All right. Okay, let me see. Thanks. Okay. Oh my gosh, this is so great to see everybody. I am so excited. We've been planning this event for a long time. We were supposed to do this last November and things happened, and here we are. So I just appreciate each and every one of you for being in this room and for caring. So today we're going to just talk a little bit about celebrating what we've built. It's not just projects, it's people, it's partnerships, and it's progress. And this is also a bit of a photo collage, so I dug into some of our archives, so you may see some of yourselves over time here in the slideshow. So our history, we have some history that led up to our existence that included some lawsuits, some water quality things, increasing water quality concerns, growing population, and of course we live in one of the most erratic watersheds in the United States. By virtue of our natural topography, the highly erosive soils, our flashy creeks, and then you layer on this human element where we're the fastest growing area in the state of Colorado. So all these concerns were happening. There's also a big pipeline that came in. Colorado Springs Utilities built a Southern Delivery System pipeline that brings water from Pueblo County, Pueblo Reservoir, up to Colorado Springs. And Pueblo County said, okay, we'll let you do this. We'll give you a permit for that, but you need to pay $50 million to an entity to mitigate the impacts from the return flows, because we bring water up, we use it gets treated, and it goes right back down Fountain Creek. More water in our creeks means more erosion, more sedimentation, more issues. And so an entity was needed to be stood up to take care of those requirements with the 1041 permit. So there was a 2-year process, a vision task force of over 30 citizens that met regularly trying to figure out, what should we do? What is this thing? And it came to be that, water doesn't really know the political boundaries that we have on our pretty little maps. And maybe we should look at the watershed scale and work at the watershed scale. And so that's really what happened is we established this 9 government district, 9 different jurisdictions. It was stood up as a state bill. And so we're a special district. We're not a nonprofit, one of these quasi-government entities. And so we support the 9 member governments that are within the district. And we've got a big task list to do. It's around managing sedimentation and erosion and taking care of water quality and making sure there's open space and helping to protect, find opportunities for recreation. A lot of things on our to-do list. So this is a little bit more specific map of the district. It does have, contains both El Paso and Pueblo counties. And then there's a little blue strip there. That's our land use authority area. So it's a 100-year floodplain south of the city of Fountain to the city of Pueblo, where if any activities happen there, it needs to go through our land use process to make sure that what's happening on the creek happens to our standards. So, and the other aspect is with those 9 member governments, they each contribute to the general fund of the district on an annual basis. So if you're part of one of our member governments, go ahead and raise your hand. Extremely grateful for the support that we get from our member governments. So really, thank you all for supporting the district and its work. All right, people make it happen. I'd like to recognize my super hardworking, super talented staff. Are they around right now? Any of my Fountain Creek staff in the room? Go ahead and raise your room. Oh, there's Steve in the back. We have Susan. Where's Jordan? There's Jordan in the back. Where's Lucy? Lucy's working. Good. Okay. And there's Mary. Mary's here too. No, they're just awesome team. Always just have to be grateful for who I get to work with. I also have an amazing board of directors, those representing our local governments. If you're on my board of directors, please go ahead and raise your hand. Or if you're an alternate, we have board members and alternates. Thank you for your hard work, your dedication. I appreciate that. And then also we have 3 committees that support the district. We have the Monetary Mitigation Fund Advisory Committee, the MMF. We have a citizens group, and we have a technical group. If you've been on one of those committees, if you're currently serving on those committees, go ahead and raise your hand in recognition, because we appreciate you coming to our meetings, sharing your expertise, and helping us move our work forward. Partnerships are another huge aspect of the work that we do, key to our success. So here's a little sampling of some of the folks that we've been working with, building these relationships over the years, and that continues to grow. And if we haven't worked with you yet, we want to. So raise your hand and we'll come find you during the happy hour. So let's talk a little bit about our history. In the earlier years, under the guidance of Mr. Larry Small, who's with us in the room today, my predecessor, we didn't want to just, you could really throw, yes, let's give a hand to Larry Small. Big shoes to fill there, did an amazing job for this organization. And when we started doing this work, we could pretty much throw a dart in Fountain Creek and you could hit a project. And we wanted to make sure that the work that we do is grounded in strong science, that it's adaptable. And so we've done a number of studies and master plans to really determine where the best place is to maximize the limited dollars that we have and make sure that these projects are going to be impactful. We also, of course, are a regional convener and partner with everybody. And we have this huge outreach and education program. So with the outreach that we do, we inspire watershed-wise behavior. We're here to inspire positive behavior change leading to a healthier watershed. And I think a lot of people know us because of our outreach programs. They learn about the district when they come out to do a cleanup, and they have a positive experience with this organization where you can spend 1 hour and make a huge difference and go, wow, that was really easy. And now I know a little bit more about my watershed and I'm a little bit more connected to it and I'm going to care a little bit more. So that's kind of, our cleanups are kind of a gateway where we get people out in the watershed, inspire them to take the next step and do the next thing. Our Creek Week of course, is the largest cleanup in the state of Colorado. We've been at it for 12 years and we've engaged over 25,000 different citizens, volunteers giving of their time to pick up trash. I think that's pretty impressive. How many of you have participated in a cleanup with us? Okay, look at all these watershed warriors out there. Great. If you haven't, save the date for Saturday, May 2nd. That's the Great American Cleanup. Okay, so, and then of course, once you're done with your cleanup, we want you to go to any one of our 20 plus breweries that are part of the Brewshed Alliance and drink a glass, raise a glass to clean water. The other thing we've been doing is installing residential rain gardens, and these are an amazing way at the individual homeowner scale to take your roof runoff, direct it into your yard and build a bowl-shaped garden that's going to capture that water and so it doesn't run off into the street, capture pollution, and head downstream. So these are beautifying these properties, and you could tell, look at the before pictures. This was basically landscape abandonment at its finest. Nothing going on there. And here we have pollinator species. These are all native plants that are going to do well in our climate, that are going to actually, some of these plants have food, so they can be a food source for these families. And then we do our rain barrel sale. How many of you have a rain barrel, early adapters? Great. These are legal now. By the way, 2016, the headline said, "You won't believe what Colorado legalized now." And it was rain barrels. Okay, so you can get one of those. In fact, we'll be giving away 2 later today. So if you don't have your rain barrel, today could be your day. So on to our restoration work. There's a map there that has little dots, and I know these are kind of hard for you all to see, but all those little dots are in the southern part of the watershed. Because the monetary mitigation funds we were given, that $50 million, said it has to be spent south of Fountain on the main stem of Fountain Creek so that Pueblo County receives maximum benefit. These are all multi-beneficial projects. So we looked with our master plans, we didn't want to just piecemeal this. We wanted to look at the whole system and not just isolated spots. So many of these plans have actually been pulled off the shelf and utilized by the City of Colorado Springs Stormwater and the Air Force Academy. So we're proud to be, supporting that work that's carried on by others. When I came on board 4 years ago, I thought, why don't we kind of look back a little bit and see how these projects that we've put in are faring? Are they effective? Is the vegetation coming in? And so we've done a couple of effectiveness and lessons learned study to inform future work. I think it's really important to look back and then to look forward. And so we've learned a lot. And the bottom project there is one of our best projects. Our friends at Matrix designed the Mass Antonio Trust there. And as you can see, it's a nice curved area where that creek was just beating it up and eating up the land. And so they put in bendway weirs, which are rocks buried really deep, that helps to trap the sediment, and it helps to slow the flow, and it helps to push that creek back out into the middle. So that is a project that is faring really well, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. The other piece is the Jackson Creek scoping study. Though we had those $50 million in the southern part of the watershed, we can accept, issues from any of our jurisdictions. And so the town of Monument came to us and said, we've got this Jackson Creek. It's right north of the Air Force Academy. It's highly eroded. We're really worried about this creek. We said, well, we don't have money to spend up there, but we found a grant and we were able to do this preliminary scoping study in support of that effort, teeing it up for maybe a time when the federal grants come back. So we do little things where we can. It's kind of the point of that one. And we're finally starting to do maintenance. How many of you maintain your car, your teeth, your relationships? These are good things, right? So that was one of the pieces that's missing. That $50 million that we received is for new projects only, no maintenance budget. So we went in, did this effectiveness study and said, okay, where is the highest probability of something happening here? The Bar Farm Phase 2 project was, I believe, $5 million or so. And the top of that project was starting to come apart. And so if we let this go, all of that would end up downstream. So we said, okay, we're going to start here, our first project. Let's, bring in 700 tons of rock, really shore up the northern end of that project. And half of that money of our little $100,000 maintenance budget, half of that came from our friends at the Lower Ark. Where's Jess? Thank you to our friends in the Lower Ark Valley Water Conservancy District for supporting us. They realize that what happens upstream impacts downstream. So, we have learned a lot. We can't build things and walk away. We just cannot do that anymore. We, need to adapt with things. This is all something that this creek has been on the move since the beginning of time. This is not going to change. This is what we're up against. So we need to kind of learn how to work within that paradigm. We're here to set the table today. You're all enjoying a seat, maybe meeting some new friends. This is a time to think about, how could I plug into the district? We want to partner with you. We want to work with you. We have a lot of common goals together to leverage our funding and keep this great momentum going that we've started. Our future looks like the in-lieu fee program, which you're going to hear about today. We're going to keep protecting people, keep protecting infrastructure, and protecting natural systems. We're going to scale up our maintenance. We're going to look long-term at where this organization is going, and part of that needs to include sustainable funding. These projects are very expensive, but as you'll hear later today, it's much better to spend now than have a disaster come and have some sort of catastrophic event, and it's much more expensive later. So kind of my last piece here, Fountain Creek is a shared resource and a shared responsibility, and the advice from the river there is simple. Let's move with intention. Let's think about downstream, and let's understand that every decision we make leaves a mark. These young girls are drawing the watershed that they call home. Those could be future engineers. Those could be future alleys out there. This is reminding us that the work we do today is going to mean a lot to someone tomorrow. And when we invest in restoration, education, and collaboration, we're investing in a safer, healthier, more resilient future for our communities and for generations we haven't met yet. And that's why this work matters. Want to shout out a thank you to our sponsors today for helping us not only with today's efforts, but all of our outreach in the last year. We have a new sponsorship program. There's flyers if you want to grab one on the way out and do your part to support us. But I'm going to leave it at that. We're going to move on to our next lunchtime speaker. So we have Amy come on up here. She's probably known to some of you. That's how the small water world works. I like to call it Smolorado Springs because everybody kind of knows everybody. It's kind of like that in the water world too. I met Amy in 2023. We invited her to be a speaker for one of our liquid lectures, which we host monthly at a brewery near you. It's edutainment, we call it. So I heard her speak, watched her captivate the audience, capture hearts and minds, and she's back to do it again. So please welcome Amy McCoy from Fluent Freshwater Insights. She's working to combine science, modeling, and visualizations to support smarter water decisions. Sound about right? Okay, there you go.
Well, hello. Pardon me. Good afternoon. It's really wonderful to be here. Thank you to Allie, and I'll figure the microphone out here. Thank you to Allie and everybody for offering me an opportunity to be here. It's a tremendous honor. I wanted to start actually with something really simple, which is to think about the start of your day. If you go into your mind and think about the start of your day, and think about, picture the faces of the people that you said hello to, and their smile and how you engaged with them. And did you take a moment to actually look up towards where the peak is and wonder, how much snow is the peak getting today? I wonder what it looks like. What will it look like on Monday when the clouds clear? Did you drop your hand to greet a pet or look out in your yard and wonder what the squirrels are doing in the snow? And then did you notice Fountain Creek or any of the tributaries? And not really professionally, but personally, as something that you notice every day or say hello to. And my guess is that for most of us, we don't necessarily incorporate a hello to Fountain Creek in our everyday, at least not yet, which I think is actually why we're here today, is to incorporate a hello to Fountain Creek. So by way of introduction, my name is, my goodness. I appreciate that Nancy just offered me the opportunity to say, you're doing great, despite dropping these a dozen times. You're gonna be okay. Thank you. My name is Amy McCoy, and I call myself a Colorado Springs lifer. I was raised here and learned to walk in my grandparents' backyard, which backs right up to Monument Creek. My family home is right on Cottonwood Creek. I think I'll just hold this. My family's home was and continues to be right on Cottonwood Creek. And I've always had this idea that my home is really in the light and shadow of big mountains and in a landscape that's carved by waterways. And yet, when somebody asks me, I'll say, I'm not from someplace with water. And that seems such a contradiction to me, since I can actually tell when it's rained east of Academy Boulevard by the sound of Cottonwood Creek. And still, I consider myself to be from a place that does not have water. And I wonder, as a question for today, how is it that in a community that already understands affection, we have affection for Pikes Peak, we understand what it's like to say hello to Pikes Peak, that we don't necessarily notice, or it escapes our notice, the waterways that flow through our city, and Pueblo and the entire watershed. So what I'm offering up here today is, as we're listening to scientific panels and technical updates of the hard-earned and well-deserved progress of Fountain Creek Watershed District, that we ask ourselves, what would it take for our community to be in an active relationship with the creek? Dare I even say friendship with the creek? And I think that might start with stories, and the stories that we tell about the creek. Because stories really direct our attention to what we think is normal, to what we are willing to fund or participate in, what we're willing to repair, and what we think is healthy. That is all determined by our stories. And so I just wanted to walk through, in thinking about today's presentation, a couple of the stories that we often tell. And the first is that the creek is something we have acted upon. I drew from Jim O'Donnell's book, Fountain Creek, which I understand from Allie we're raffling today. Yes, we're giving away. He writes this sentence that just kind of stopped me in my tracks, and I'm going to read it directly. He says, over the years, the fountain has been dammed, diverted, poisoned, rerouted, mapped, named, channelized, filled with physical and human debris, reduced, augmented, confused, litigated, studied, stolen, replaced, piped, known, unknown, forgotten, misunderstood, blamed, screened, broken, and very nearly tamed. That is a story of us acting a lot upon the creek. And it's kind of brutal, actually, because it really does hold a truth about modern cities everywhere, which is that we have shaped the creek to meet our needs. And sometimes that shaping is literal. We've moved banks, we've put in riprap, diverted it. And sometimes it's cultural. It's where we put the less desirable aspects of modern urban living, such that the creek becomes a hazard, becomes a liability. And so often, the creek also determines a boundary between jurisdictions, establishes an us and a them, or an over there and an over here. And so it sort of always strikes me that in these positions, we're surprised when the creek acts like a creek, when it has a personality. Which brings me to my second story, which I think that we'll hear about as well, and is certainly sort of the origin story of the district, which is the creek acts upon us. And that's most obvious in flooding. And I noticed, I was looking at all the floods that are listed in the book, the booklet for today's event, that between 1826 and 1902, there were 10 floods recorded. That's 80 years, 10 floods. It's a lot of flooding. And the 1965 flood, I imagine some people in the room remember that. I know my mother does. And that really shaped how we understand the creek and our relationship to it, namely that it's a risk and that damage could be done from the creek acting like a creek. And this history really matters because floods don't just move water. They move families, they move land, they move stories, and ultimately they move relationship. Our small, diminutive creek has a really big personality. And I think at times we're perhaps have been a bit afraid of that. And it's interesting because I don't know that we've failed when a creek floods, when a creek acts like a creek. I think the shortcoming is that we might expect it to act like a pipe. And we wouldn't do that necessarily to friends. So I think about that. How do we begin to perceive the creek as a creek? And ultimately, have an idea of watershed citizenship, which is sort of leads into the third story, which is a story of science and engineering. And this is a story I tell. I'm trained as an ecologist. I run a consulting firm focused on river restoration and water management and policies and laws. It's familiar and easy to talk about waterways through these lenses, like hydrology. What's the hydrograph? Peaks and valleys of the flows. Or ecology, which critters are depending on the creek. Economics, sediment, geomorphology, water quality, all things that we'll hear about today. All of this work is important and all of it is tangible to creating a relationship. But we're at risk of losing something in that storyline. Namely, that we begin to see the creek as a series of parts and lose a sense of its whole, and perhaps even lose a sense of our whole as we partition it into individual scientific topics. And so I think, what about the creek as a relationship that requires sort of care and feeding and attending to? So this brings me to thinking about how the creek has subtly shaped us. How is it part of our identity? In the same way that Pikes Peak is part of our identity, Pikes Peak region is part of our identity, the mountains are part of our identity, because it really has shaped us, even if it's invisible. These are the homelands of the Ute and the Arapaho and the Cheyenne, who used this corridor to chart paths and learn the land, and really set the footprints that we followed to build our highways, I-25, and the railroad parallel the creek. And we go up into the mountains along the creek as well. The creek really is our guide and shows us where to go. And it does that in invisible ways. It also shapes where we've put infrastructure, how we build bridges, how bike paths are built along the creek so that people can move up and down. All of this actually follows the creek. The creek doesn't follow us. It holds the life of this region together. And so my mind was brought to a very famous essay written by Luna Leopold, who was Aldo Leopold's son. He wrote this and delivered it in a speech in 1977 in March, which I thought was notable because it was 3 months before the 1977 flood right here in Colorado Springs. And the speech was called A Reverence for Rivers. And he asked the really provocative question to a group of sort of technocrats in Los Angeles and California. What happens when we treat water management as a technical problem alone when we rely on economics, politics, and engineering to decide what a river is allowed to be. And he requested of the crowd that we take a different posture, a more humble one or a more thoughtful one. And he wrote that there is a balance and a harmony in natural systems. The maintenance of this balance should be the object of both our wonder and our admiration. What is needed is a gentler basis for perceiving the effects of our engineering capabilities. This more humble view of our relation to the hydrologic system requires a reverence for rivers. And I love that phrase, a reverence for rivers and a gentler bias. And I feel like if there's any community I've ever been in my life, Colorado Springs, Pueblo, the Pikes Peak region, this watershed district, we understand that because we live beneath Pikes Peak. We live within view of Pikes Peak and the mountains around Pikes Peak. And in Pueblo, we live within view of the Spanish Peaks and the Sangre de Cristos. And it really defines our sense of place. We understand what reverence means. And my question today in all of our work is, how do we foster that sense of reverence for our waterways, the actual veins and arteries of our entire life? And that ultimately the water is something we belong to, because without it, this region would look so very different. So what does it mean to be friends with a creek? And I was thinking of 5 things, maybe very simple things, but something to just keep in our minds as we listen to the presentations today. And the first is notice. In the same way that we notice Pikes Peak or squirrels or our pets or our friends and our family and those that we love, can we notice the creek every time you drive across it or you walk by it or you're biking next to it, or even when it irritates you, it smells bad or it's frightening? That's still an observation. It's an observation that says, hey, I noticed you. And I think that's really important. The second is, just like a friendship has moods and we all have moods, the creek has moods. And sometimes it's really dry, and sometimes it's wet. And it's interesting to see how snow melt settles on it, and what floods do, and where they go, and how they move. I was actually listening to a presentation this past week of somebody who lives in the Klamath Watershed Basin in Oregon, and she was talking about Oregon and California. She was talking about the dams coming down in the Klamath. And she was telling a very technical presentation about taking the dams down, and then paused and said, it occurs to me that the river remembered how to be a river once the dams came down. And I think that our creek will remember how to be a creek as the third thing, make room for it in our engineering, in our design, in our studies. Ask ourselves, how much room does the creek need to stretch out its elbows and sort of wiggle and have enough room to not feel crowded or claustrophobic? What kind of room do we need to give the creek? And the fourth thing then is to introduce the creek to a neighbor. I circulated before this talk and asked people, do you think people know what Fountain Creek is? And for the most part, people said no, that they wouldn't assume that their neighbor or their friend or the person at the store would know what Fountain Creek is, even if they're at Trader Joe's and Monument Creek is right there. Or we're going down to Pueblo and the creek is right there, or you're flying out of Colorado Springs Airport and you look down. And so I think maybe starting conversations with a neighbor about the creek in the same way that we talk about the peak. And then the fifth is what Allie said, participate. And that's, of course, what we're all doing here today. And I just want to shout out again the work that the district has done. That Creek Week cleanups have engaged 25,000 volunteers in a region of 900,000 people. That's something. It's something. And as we invite neighbors and ask people, hey, have you met Fountain Creek? Are you aware that there's a Cottonwood Creek or any of the creeks and tributaries around here? That we will get more people. And it's not just a cleanup, really. What it is a culture of care. And I think especially today in our world of warming days and drying days and fractured times where we feel fear, the culture of care is our antidote to that. So in closing, I'll just end where I began, which is not dropping my papers, by the way. that we are going to hear so much about the personality of the creek here today. And I wonder what it would be like if we thought of it as a personality and not as studies. If we understood it as the characteristics of our creek. And if we called it our creek, as opposed to the creek. And then I'll ask, how often does our creek come to mind in your daily work, in your daily amblings, in your daily living? And how is it shaping you? How is it shaping how you know this place, which we call home? And how is it shaping the sense of belonging that we're all striving for? So with that, I'll close and pass it to the next speaker. Thank you so much.
Room, and you know who you are, whether you volunteered, whether you're a partner, whether you're a leader who's helped to shape the district's future. So with that said, we're going to hear from some of the leaders who've helped to shape that district's future, and we're excited to have them here today. Many of the people already know who our board chair is, and I welcome. You get the chance to go ahead and join, and actually joining this year, our new board chair is the commissioner. We want to have him up here, and those who are shaping that vision. The 2026 Fountain Creek Watershed District board chair is El Paso County Commissioner Bill Wysong. Bill, can you come on up here? Thank you.
Well, good morning, everyone. Well, wait a minute, we're afternoon now. And thank you all for being here. I'm excited to join this group and very honored to serve as the new board chair of Fountain Creek Watershed District. A couple of things observation driving up. Fountain Creek's kind of like Colorado Springs, Colorado weather. It's pretty crazy. You can never pinpoint, wait 5 minutes. I think the creek mirrors that. And before we got started, I was asked to have a little interview, and it was, okay, can you explain in one word Fountain Creek? And the first word that came to mind was impossible. Not only that I couldn't do it in one word, but that kind of defines it. But after listening to Amy and some of the others, I think schizophrenic is a better term. And leading off the group, but I also kind of feel like I'm maybe halftime entertainment. I'm one of the newest folks that you'll be hearing from today. Been elected for a year. What happens upstream affects those downstream. No one group can manage this to work across boundaries. And I think you've already heard a lot of examples about that. For me, this is personal in the sense that conservation is kind of part of my DNA. I grew up in Oregon. When Amy mentioned Klamath, a long ways away from there, but I know it. Spent a lot of time around the creeks and the waterways as an Eagle Scout. That position also gave me the ability to teach others. So this is just, as I said, it's very important to me. These early experiences taught me to respect the land and the responsibility we all have to care for it. Lessons that will still guide how I approach the work that I will be doing for this next year. We have a simple but important mission to serve as stewards of the watershed, working to protect, restore, and sustain its health, not just for today, but for the future grandkids, great-great-grandkids. Partnerships are the heart of this work, as Ali explained in great and eloquent manner. It's the heart of this work. Local governments, nonprofits, volunteers, businesses, engineers, and residents all play a very important role. We are most effective when we align our efforts, because the watersheds don't follow jurisdictional boundaries, and neither should our solutions. An example is the upcoming Frost Project that you kind of heard a little bit about. Is it a great example of that mindset? It shows that our commitment to learning, embracing new technologies, finding cost-effective engineering solutions, and like many public agencies, we operate within a very limited budget. And that reality challenges us to be creative and disciplined with every dollar that you have entrusted us with. Those constraints often push us to think outside the box. Oh, come on. And I'm very honored to step into this role at a time when the board is well positioned to build upon the strong foundation that was laid by past boards and our executive director and her wonderful team. They've achieved meaningful progress under challenging conditions. And my goal is to continue those hard-fought gains with a thoughtful approach and a gentle hand. As chair, I'm committed to continuing this collaborative, conservation-minded approach, one that listens, adapts, and uses our resources wisely and plans for the future while responding to today's realities. And again, I told Allie that I should be able to cut this down from the 12 minutes. So thank you again for being here, the work that each and one of you do. I truly look forward to working with you all in this upcoming year. Thank you. Oh, it wasn't on my notes. So with great pleasure, our next speaker, we got to know over the last few years in many of my pre-elected duties. Let's welcome Sally Clark.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. As one of my successors on the Board of County Commissioners, it's great to be able to be up here. My current job is a little bit different, so I'm going to just briefly tell you what I do right now, and then I'm going to jump right into this. But I serve as the State Director for the U.S. Department of Agriculture Rural Development. And what is that? It's three things. So if you remember ABC, you got it. It's affordable housing. It's looking at business and economic development, and then we do community programs, so that would be the C. And so we do everything from water and environmental programs to building community facilities to providing housing for those that are in low income areas, but all in rural Colorado, at least for me. And there's one of me in 47 different areas across the United States. So that's what I do now. But as I rewind where we are, and when Allie asked me to come and speak, and then I did this interview, some of us were interviewed, and I kept thinking, gosh, it's been so long. Well, it's been 20 years. Can you believe that? 20 years since we started this discussion about water running downhill and what it meant to the city of Pueblo at the time. My grandma had a farm in Pueblo. She lived along in the county, actually, and got her water off the Bessemer Ditch. Those of you from Pueblo know what that is. And she used to say, I'm never going on city water. So she would fill a cistern. And when we would come and spend a month with her in the summer, every time you turned on the water, all this like yucky stuff would come out for a while until we used the bathtub a few times. But there was always this rub between the city of Pueblo and Puebloans and those folks in Colorado Springs. In fact, I remember as a kid, she saying to me, that damn Colorado Springs, they created humidity by building that reservoir. So when there's humidity in the summer in Pueblo, you can thank Colorado Springs for it. That aside, I think, when they asked us in an interview to think about what that one word that there's lots of different words, and we heard them. And Amy, you went into that. Allie mentioned that as well, and I think Bill alluded to it also. I think it's about relationships and partnerships. And where I came into it as a former city council member and then a county commissioner at the time in El Paso County, I was elected in 2005 to the Board of County Commissioners. Well, at that time, there was this thing called a lawsuit, right, between Pueblo and Colorado Springs. So someone tagged on my shoulder and my shirt and said, "Hey, you're a county commissioner. You don't have a lawsuit. So what can you do to help us?" And so establishing those relationships came on the scene of a county commissioner who had served with federal positions as well, Loretta Kennedy. Some of you may remember Loretta. And she was a force to be reckoned with, trust me. And we sat down as two county commissioners and started talking about how we could get to the next place. Then Jeff Chostner came onto the scene, and we worked very closely to try and get legislation passed, of which we were successful. I can't believe we started the discussion in 2006, but it didn't actually pass until a few years later, and had to go to the legislature and explain why. We used the Greenway District, up in Denver, and we were trying to figure it out. And then I look at the original name, and I'm like, wow, that was really long. The Fountain Creek Watershed Flood Control and Greenway District. So I'm glad you kind of shortened that off later, but we were trying to capture everything that the district would mean. And I know it sounded like a mouthful, but it really did say what we were trying to do. And hi, Mark Shea, and Gary Bostrom, and even Margaret Radford, who many of you know, who was a councilwoman. We all started these discussions even before we started talking about the district itself, and getting together and trying to bring consensus. And Larry Small came in, and we really had an interesting group of people who had different ideas on how to get there, but we all wanted the same thing. I think it's important that those relationships that started then are still there today, maybe with new faces, but it is continued. And it's important because we all know that water does run downhill. And no matter where you are, and we saw that when I was a commissioner and we had the Waldo Canyon fire, and we tried to convince CDOT that a little bit bigger culvert was going to be needed under Highway 24, and they wouldn't listen until it topped the highway and killed someone. And you don't want that to be the reality of why you do a project. You want to get ahead of it. You want to get ahead of the water that runs downhill and what that means to those folks down on the hill below. So why it matters, and I think Amy really brought that to light, is we don't think about creeks mattering. If you're in Green Mountain Falls, you probably do think about that because it runs right through your little town in Green Mountain Falls. But it doesn't necessarily, to the people in Colorado Springs, they don't see Fountain Creek every day. And even those like me who live on the west side, a couple blocks from here, I may drive by it, but I don't really think about it on a daily basis. So it's important for us to have that vision going forward. There are a lot of people that came to the table, and we had a lot of acrimonious debate over many different things. And Councilwoman Henjum, we've had these same discussions about the importance of water and looking towards the future. So don't forget the work that's gone on before. Remember that what happens today will have an impact tomorrow. And we know that regardless, I think in Pueblo, there's more of a recognition of the waterway because it's right in the downtown. Wasn't always, right? It got moved out of town because of flooding. Then it got moved back into town because they wanted the recreational opportunities and sort of the economic development surrounding it. And transportation and bridges, when I came on board the Board of County Commissioners, Old Pueblo Road just about disintegrated into Fountain Creek. And it was an emergency that we had to I now know what a gabion basket is. I learned so many things along the way that I didn't know about in terms of engineering. But those things happen, and if we can prevent them from happening in the first place, utilize the district to really do what it meant, which was watershed, flood control, and greenway, then we will have achieved a lot. Thank you to all of those who continue to be a part of this discussion. Give your time, energy. Some of you don't get paid for it. You know, it's one of those great volunteer boards sometimes that you get 100% raise every year and you never make any more money. Think about what's coming ahead. Chris Lieber, nice to see you too. A lot of friends out here in the audience. I remember the folks that were at the original table. And thanks to Heather Bergman, who came forward and helped us facilitate a really unruly group of folks who had the same vision. We just had different ways of getting there. So thanks to everybody. Thank you, Allie, for inviting me. It's great to see where we are 20 years later. I don't know if I'll be here 20 years from now, but I guess we'll see if we have another celebration. But thanks for all of you for what you do every day to support our waterways, our creeks. And just remember, next time you're in Pueblo and it's very humid, you have to know that it's Colorado Springs' fault. Thanks.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jeff Chosner. I am a good friend of Sally Clark, who was supposed to introduce me here, Sally, so I have to say my name is... It really is great to see so many people here who were on this before, Mark and Larry Small and Richard Scorman, and going back 20 years ago. And Sally kind of alluded to it, but it wasn't always a friendly meeting when you were there. A lot of those visioning task force meetings resembled more of a psychological encounter session, where you were able to get off your chest how you felt about each other's community, with the economic, the cultural, the hydrological, geological differences between Pueblo and El Paso County. It was not easy to go into those meetings sometime. But I think it was through that honesty and through expressing our opinions and our positions on what we should do with regard to the creek that we came together. And for some of us old heads in here, this is very gratifying to see everybody here kind of one mind. And all of us trying to do the best thing by the creek. We call it the creek, but quite frankly, if you live down street, I call it Fountain River now. Because when I was a kid, growing up in Pueblo, you could walk across Fountain Creek anywhere you wanted to without really causing any risk to yourself. I dare say you can't do that today. We have rerouted parts of the Arkansas from the dam up to Colorado Springs, and we have rerouted it down Fountain Creek, which is now Fountain River. But we have, in the process of all these negotiations, made sure that we have a living river in the Arkansas still going through the center of Pueblo. And that's because people of good faith and goodwill on both sides of the county lines made that happen. And I take my hat off to my friends and colleagues in El Paso County who put themselves in my shoes to understand where I stood. And I did that for them, understanding the limitations of their politics up north. And we came together and we did this well. One of the proudest moments of my public life was when we had the Fountain Creek District legislation signed by the governor. And people don't realize this now, but that legislation went through committee in the House and the Senate and on the floor of both bodies and signed by the governor without one dissenting vote. Without one dissenting vote, neither Republican or Democrat from either county did that. And keep in mind, it is a taxing district. Imagine try and do that today, you know? But it was because people were willing to come together to do that. As you all probably know, I'm a Pueblo County boy through and through. My family has been in Pueblo County since 1875, when I had a Union cavalry officer come out here after the Civil War and has settled there. My grandmother used to tell me about the train wreck in Eden, which is referenced in Jim O'Donnell's book, about the people that were lost in that. My grandparents ran businesses in Pueblo during the 21 flood. My grandmother had a music store. My grandfather had a business college. They would tell me about the 21 flood. And then in 65, I'm from the east side of Pueblo. Me and my east side cousins watched the water come down going underneath the 4th Street and the 8th Street Bridge, for those of you who are familiar with Pueblo. So we have seen that through and through. So this body and this group of people here and our mission has been central to me. It's a labor of love for me to be on this. And when I left it in 2013, because I sort of had to leave it because of other duties, I always kept an eye on what was going on. And you guys have done such great work over the years. You have been terrific in everything that you've done. It's just that we need to fulfill that vision. We need to take it to the next step. And you folks are the platform to be able to do that. 2 observations. One, I would like to see us re-energize, and re-energize, most importantly, our governmental entities. Back in 2010, when it came open, the seats on the Fountain Creek board, you had to stand in line for it. You had people standing there wanting to come on this board. And I appreciate everybody who's here now, but we need to get that energy back. And I know Allie and I know Bill's going to take that to the various entities and tell them our story, how important we are to bringing people together. And the competition is gone. This is all about 2 communities who are a model for water use, not in Colorado, but for the entire West. This is something that should be catching on everywhere. I would argue that this is the most important watershed in the state of Colorado. And to take the disparate groups that came together to make this happen, but the vision is not quite done. We need to make this an educational, a recreational area. We always envisioned having hiking trails and horseback trails up and down Fountain Creek, having educational centers there, having other kind of amenities there, so that we could make sure that the communities came together and it was for the benefit of all of us in this region of the state. That's one observation, is that we need to reanimate the people, the money givers, and the people who can make that vision come true. And the second thing is, and we all need to work on this, we fought hard, and I'll tell you, Sally stood up to another county commissioner. It was a 3-2 vote in the county commissioners to make this a taxing district. There's no problem voting for the district, but they didn't want to have any teeth to it. And Sally was one of the best advocates for El Paso County, saying this needs to happen. And she persuaded that 3rd vote. It came along. We need to go back now and do everything we can to try and get a dedicated revenue source for the creek. I don't know how that is. There's a lot of other ideas out there. Bill's on top of it. Allie is. I'm catching up. There's a lot of different ideas. But we have the ability to institute a mill levy, and I think it can be done. I know they always used to say, El Paso County will never pass a tax. Well, guess what? It's just as hard in Pueblo County as it is up here. But you guys actually have been very creative, what you've done with your transportation issues up here and how you've done it. And you should be very proud of that. And I think we as a district can still do that to get it done here. But I was part of the SDS negotiations, the 1041 process, and involved in that was the $50 million to go to the creek. But we're down now to less than 10 million, with not enough to sustain all the good things we want to do. So in Air Force parlance, we're running out of altitude and airspeed, folks. We got to do something to get those revenues back where they are. And I look forward to working with everybody here and doing exactly that. I promised Allie I'd be 5 to 6 minutes. I think I've hit my time. I can't tell you how proud, and I mean this sincerely, this is a labor of love for me. I can't tell you how proud I am to be back on this board, to work with all the good people here, and I will do everything I can with what remains of my public career to make this watershed an amenity for me, you, your kids, and your grandkids and generations to come, because they deserve that in this part of the state. Thank you very much.
So many great and inspiring words. These are such great things to hear. I really appreciate the viewpoint that you brought about a unanimous vote is what it took. And there are these moments where things divide us and these things that unite us. And maybe this is one of those moments. When I work with communities across the country, most of them have waterways. The question is whether they treat it as an impediment to what they're trying to do, or whether it's an investment in where they're trying to go. And I think that's what's being asked of us here is to think about this concept of how we can come together. But at one point, it was a unanimous vote because it's so important to us. And so it doesn't matter your affiliation. It doesn't matter what city you're from. The opportunity is here for us to pull together and create that opportunity again for the next generation. So investment, impediment, your choice. And today we get to make that choice. Where are we going to land on the other side of that? So really deeply honored by your words. These are such great speakers and such a great opportunity. For those who have paved the way and continue to prioritize this important work, we salute you. Thank you so much for that. Another person who likely needs no introduction is a woman who's helped shape this community through thoughtful leadership and public service. As a former Colorado Springs councilwoman, a community champion, and a founding member of Pikes Peak Waterways and a little project you may have heard of, the Colorado Springs Creek Plan. And one of my very favorite council members when I had the chance to work with her and somebody who I have deep respect for, I'd like to welcome Jan Martin. Jan, come on up.
Well, thank you, Nick. You know, you were one of my favorite city employees, too, at the same time. Jeff, you're a Pueblo boy through and through, and I'm a Colorado Springs girl through and through. And everything I do and everything I've done over the last 20 years is about the community of Colorado Springs. You know, after I served on council, I started working with Lyda Hill Philanthropies, and we were taking grant requests for around the community. And one of the things we began to notice was we were getting several grant requests for Monument and Fountain Creek through Colorado Springs. And as a group, we decided maybe it was time for us to take a step back as a community. And rather doing a little bit here, a little bit there, a piece here, a piece there, that it was time for us to create a broader vision for the waterways through Colorado Springs, similar to what cities all over the state have done, from Fort Collins, Denver, Pueblo, and even Trinidad is working on that now. So we did. We took a step back and we decided to create a vision for the waterways through Colorado Springs. And it's called the COS Creek Plan. Hopefully you've heard of it. It's a wonderful document. It's very visual so that we can all kind of get a sense of what the possibilities are for our waterways through our community. It's really, this project will be transformative for the city of Colorado Springs. It has that potential. As you know, as we've watched Denver and their Platte River project, they've been working on it for 40 years. And so this is going to be for the long term for us to get where we want to be. But we've met with the Army Corps of Engineers, who's very interested in our project. And actually, when they first took a look at it, the first thing they said to us is, "You're not thinking big enough." And so we've actually expanded the footprint of our project. It now runs 12 miles from Garden of the Gods Road through Colorado Springs, Monument Creek, down to the confluence, and then on down to the El Pomar sports field down south of Colorado Springs. Any of you who have worked with the Army Corps of Engineers know that the very first thing you have to do is to create a feasibility study. We were very fortunate over the last few years that you have to go to Congress to get approval for this, that we were very fortunate that we were able to get in front of Congress in the Word of Bill, which is payment for the feasibility study, within 2 years. And it took Denver 10 years to get to that place. It shows some of the enthusiasm for our project, not only through the Army Corps, but through our local elected officials who have been very supportive. So the feasibility study has been approved by Congress. The funding was available. And we went to the Army Corps of Engineers and said, "So how long is this going to take?" And they said, 5 to 7 years. And, you know, I kind of looked at him and said, "Do you know how old I'll be in 5 to 7 years?" And so we began to look for other options, other ways to speed up this process. And that is normal for work with the Army Corps, and many of you probably know. And we found what is known as the 203 process that the Army Corps offers, where the local community can take on responsibility for the feasibility process. It means that we'll pay for the study, and we'll work with the Army Corps as our technical advisor as we do the feasibility study ourselves. That's where we are today. We are working hard. We have a collaboration with the city and utilities. You know, these kinds of projects are big lifts. And we knew right away that this was not going to be possible for any one organization or any one entity to accomplish this. So we created an agreement with the City of Colorado Springs, their stormwater entity, and Colorado Springs Utilities, and Pikes Peak Waterways, who is the nonprofit that was created specifically with one mission in mind, and that was to implement the COS Creek Plan. These three entities are the ones that are working with the Army Corps of Engineers. And it's a beautiful public and private partnership. The city and utilities, Fountain, Monument Creek, and Colorado Springs are workhorses for them. And this partnership allows us, a public-private with philanthropy dollars, we know how to go and raise money where the city has the technical expertise to get these projects done. So it's been a wonderful project that's been created. Our next 2 years, we're now looking at possibly 2 years for the feasibility study, and I might still be able to be around when that one's done. But there's really nothing else we can do until this feasibility study is done. As those of you know, once the feasibility study is done, it tells us what we can and can't do, and then the wheels come off and we really begin to work on the project. So that's where we are today, and I just wanted to give everybody a little brief update. Chris Lieber, who is our project manager for Pikes Peak Waterways, and I will be here to table later today. And if anybody has any questions, please come. We'd love to answer them for you and just give you any update that you might want. We have a timeline of the feasibility study that we're glad to show you and work with. Before I step down, I just want to mention the importance of collaboration. We have this collaboration agreement with the city and utilities, and we wouldn't be where we are today without that. But everyone in this room has been collaborating with somebody else in a water project within this district. And we have worked particularly closely with Allie in the Fountain Creek Watershed District. Our work is farther north in the district. So everything that we do will eventually go down through where the district has been doing their work. And so it's really important that we collaborate and work closely together. We want our project, as well as Allie's projects, to be win-wins for everybody. And that's how this all will work and how it all fits together. We're really pleased to be here. Allie, thank you for giving me a few minutes to speak. We're so excited about the COS Creek Plan. It really will change the landscape of Colorado Springs. So thank you, everybody.